haunting ghost story, which was told on an Australian television series back in the 90s. We will call it A Cry for Help. I was in my early 20s. My hobby was riding jumping horses at country shows. This particular night, I was heading home from a show. The air was clear. The night felt good. When I came to a small creek, I dismounted to let the horses take some water. I then walked around a little upstream. I remember the water was pure, and especially that it was icy cold. I would recall how cold it was later, when I had to reassure myself that I had been awake during the events of this night. It was also a night with a full moon, and as the moon rose higher in the sky, it seemed to flood the countryside with its brightness. As I remounted, I sensed that the horses were as keen and as happy as I was that we were headed home. It had been a long day. As I rode up out of the creek, I noticed a homestead called Dingo Creek. It was familiar as I remembered passing it earlier on my way to the show. It was about then that I saw it, the figure of a man hurrying down from the farmhouse. There was something really strange about the way he looked and moved. He was frantically waving to get my attention. It was odd that he was wearing a funny old white helmet, the ones they called tiger shooters from years past. And he had a white beard, a white shirt, and an old-fashioned waistcoat that was flapping open as he ran towards me. Then, just as suddenly, he disappeared. I thought he had gone behind the tree by the shed. His waving seemed urgent, but when I went behind the shed to look for him, he was just gone.
There were a couple of stockyards there, and I made my way to the fence to have a look, but there was no sign of him there either. There was a bull, but there was no sign of this white-bearded old man. It seemed peaceful enough at this point, but the old man had just vanished, completely vanished. Where? What happened to him? Where did he go? I kept saying to myself, startled, confused, and totally perplexed. I walked around. I lit a match to see, calling out, "Hello? Where are you? What happened?" As I was saying this to myself, I turned suddenly, and to my shock, there stood the old man in what I can only describe as a ghostly and unworldly image. The figure was lit up all in a white glow is the only way I could describe it. Then the figure just instantly disappeared once again before my eyes. I was stunned and stood there in utter disbelief and shock. Suddenly, everything was crazed confusion. I could hear cries for help, a woman calling from the veranda, the sound of the horses bolting away. A man screamed. The bull was charging away. It was chaos. Chaos all around me. I panicked. I quickly mounted my horse, and as I prepared to ride off, I heard a woman once again screaming, "Please, somebody help us, please." I was so scared, so terrified and frightened. I just wanted to get out of there. As I rode away in fear, the woman kept screaming, "Somebody, please help me." But my fear was intensifying, and I just rode like the wind. Just before midnight, we reached the township, and soon after, we were safely home, the horses and I. The next morning, in the light of day, the terrifying events of the night before didn't seem quite so bad, but I was puzzled, to say the least. I thought I might find out something that could explain what had happened. I couldn't shake the feeling that in some way I had failed someone who needed help the night before. I went to the local pub, and the men there were talking about a farmer named Jack who had a property called Dingo Creek. My heart froze. I tried to stay calm as I listened to what the men were saying. Apparently, earlier in the afternoon of the day before, Jack had gone out to feed his bull. Something had gone drastically wrong. The bull had charged Jack and gored him badly. Apparently, Jack had managed to get to the farmhouse and had collapsed right in front of his wife. She had no one at all that she could call or who could help them. She was distraught as Jack lay bleeding to death. Then the men telling the story mentioned that an unknown horseman was riding by. I was even more shocked. Good grief, I said to myself. That was me. I was the unknown horseman. And when Hal, Jack's wife, called upon the horseman to help, the horseman had ridden off into the darkness. Dear God, I said to myself. Jack had died around midnight. But who, I asked myself, was the ghostly old man? Could I have imagined that? Jack was not the age of the man who had appeared in ghostly form last night. As the men kept talking, they said that they had known Jack's father, an older man with a white beard, and who had always worn an old hat known as a tiger shooter. My shock and horror kept building. Jack's father also used to wear this old waistcoat, exactly what I had seen the night before. Then one of the men said, "The funny thing is, Jack's dad was killed 20 years ago, to the day, in those same stable yards." Though I would never have all the answers to what happened that night, I came to believe that this is what happened to me at Dingo Creek. I stumbled onto a farm where a man lay dying, his wife crying for help. A plea from a father who had died 20 years earlier. I panicked because in my heart I knew I had seen a ghost. The ghost of Jack's father, although I did not know it at the time. In a country district, I had done an unspeakable thing by galloping away from a call for help, which is something that I would never normally do. But seeing a definite ghostly apparition of a man I had never seen before confused me into thinking the screams for help and the distress of the horses were also part of this ghostly, horrifying experience. Jack's dad had come back to try and get help, to save him. But sadly, Seeing this ghostly figure scared me senseless, and my instincts screamed for me to get out of there. I'll never forget that night for as long as I live, and if I could turn back time, I would surely have tried everything I could to save Jack.